The gym smelled like every gym I had ever loved. Chalk, old rubber, the flat metal tang of a room that has held a lot of effort. I had been on the compound for 6 hours, long enough to draw a key and a rack in the bachelor quarters, long enough to sign for a set of spaces I would be responsible for by morning, not nearly long enough for a single face on the base to know mine. That was on purpose. I had flown in a day early precisely so I could walk the ground without a title stapled to my chest. A commander who arrives with an entourage learns nothing. A stranger in a plain gray shirt and shorts with no name tape and no insignia and no one watching learns everything. It was a little after 2100 hours. The night shift had the compound. I found the team's own fitness facility unlocked, half the lights on, 4 men scattered across the floor doing the unglamorous late work that nobody makes videos about. I nodded at the room the way you nod at strangers in a gym, which is to say barely, and went to an open rack in the corner. I had a plan for the bar, nothing dramatic. I am 42 years old, and I have long since stopped trying to prove anything to a room. I wanted to move some weight because I had spent the day sitting in vehicles and offices, and because the night before you take command of anything is a night you do not sleep, and I would rather be tired in my body than only in my head. I had gotten through my first working set when the larger of the 2 men near me spoke. He did not look up from his own bar. He was mid-30s, thick through the shoulders, the kind of build that a certain kind of man wears like a uniform, even when he is off duty. He had a way of talking that assumed the room agreed with him before he finished the sentence. "Wrong gym, sweetheart," he said. "This one's operators only. We don't babysit in here." His partner, younger, leaner, racking plates a few feet away, smirked without looking at me either. "Go find the treadmill," he said. "Main gym's got the machines. This is grown-up stuff." I want to be honest about what happened inside me, because if I told you nothing happened, I would be lying, and this whole story is worth telling only if it is true. Something did happen. There is a specific old heat that climbs the back of your neck when a person decides who you are before you have said a single word. I have felt it in a lot of rooms, in a lot of countries, wearing a lot of different clothes. It never fully goes away. You just learn what to do with it. What I did with it was finish my set. I want to be clear that this was not a strategy. I was not, in that moment, thinking about the morning or about who those 2 men were, or about what they were going to feel in roughly 9 hours when they found out. I was simply doing the thing I have trained myself to do over 20 years, which is to let the loud version of a moment pass by without me in it. The loudest thing in any room is almost always a person performing for it. I had learned a long time ago that I did not have to be that person, and that refusing to be, quietly, was a kind of strength that nobody could take a photo of. So I finished the set. I racked the bar clean. I wiped it down, because my mother raised me and because the Navy finished the job, and I walked out. I did not write down their names. I did not need to. I already knew, in the way you know these things after 2 decades, that I would learn them soon enough, and that they would learn mine. The door closed behind me with the soft, pneumatic sigh those doors make. Outside, the compound was dark and orderly and smelled like salt and cut grass and diesel. I stood there for a moment in the cool and let the heat at the back of my neck cool with it. I did not get to stand there long. A man came around the corner of the building at the unhurried, deliberate pace of someone who owns the ground he is walking on, and I knew what he was before I could see his face. The way you know a certain kind of person by the way they move through the dark. He was in a working uniform, older than the men in the gym, gray coming in at the temples, built like something that had been load-bearing for a very long time. He stopped when he saw me, and he took me in. A woman in a plain gray shirt standing outside the team gym at night, and he did the calculation that senior enlisted men do faster than anyone alive. "Evening, ma'am," he said. Not sweetheart, not honey. "Ma'am," careful and level, from a man who had no idea who I was, but had learned across a lifetime that you pay the toll of respect first and sort out the details afterward, because it costs nothing and it has saved 1,000 careers. "You lost. This is a restricted area. I can walk you back to wherever you're headed." "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, Master Chief," I said, because I could read the anchors on him too. "But I'd take the walk. I'm still learning the compound again." Something moved behind his eyes at the word again. He fell in beside me without another question, the way a good chief does, filing the word away for later. We walked in the quiet for a minute, our footsteps flat on the concrete. "Silas Hardaway," he said eventually. "Command Master Chief, I've got the senior enlisted of this team for another 12 hours or so until the new skipper decides whether she wants to keep me." "She'll want to keep you," I said. He glanced at me sideways in the dark, and I watched him get about halfway to the answer and decide not to reach for the rest of it out loud, because if he was wrong, it would be embarrassing, and if he was right, it would keep. "That is a chief for you." He walked me to the edge of the officer quarters, said goodnight, and went back to his compound, and I knew that by the time I saw him again in the morning, he would have worked it all the way out, and that he would never once let on that he had spent a single second of the night before wondering whether he had just walked the incoming commanding officer home from a gym where two of his operators had called her sweetheart. Some men are worth their weight in gold precisely because of what they choose not to say. I had known a few. I was about to depend on this one. I had been on this compound before. Not this gym. The gym was newer, built in the years I was gone. But this ground, this exact patch of the world, I knew the way you know a house you grew up in. I had walked it at 24 years old, a brand new lieutenant, certain in the particular way that only the very young and the very lucky are certain, sure that I would never be truly afraid of anything, sure that the worst things happened to other people because they had not been careful enough. I know better now. That is most of what the years give you, if you let them. They take the certainty and they leave you something quieter and more useful in its place. I walked back to the bachelor officer quarters under the sodium lights. In the morning, at 0600 hours, the entire compound was going to assemble on the grinder. The flat concrete deck where this team had formed up for longer than either of those two men had been alive. And it was going to hand a SEAL team from one set of hands to another, and the hands it was going to hand it to were mine. I laid the uniform out on the chair. Service dress, pressed the day before in a hotel 2 time zones away. I checked the shoulder boards the way you check them the night before something that matters, not because you think they have changed, but because your hands need something to do. 3 stripes, Commander, 20 years of a life, flattened into a little rectangle of gold on navy blue. I did not sleep much. I had not expected to. Command is not a prize you unwrap. It is a debt you agree to carry out loud in front of everyone, and you sign for it the way you sign for everything else, knowing that from the moment your pen leaves the paper, whatever happens belongs to you. I had learned that lesson from a man named Wesley Tanner on this compound a long time ago. And the reason I did not sleep was not 2 operators in a gym. Those 2 I had already set down. The reason I did not sleep was that taking this team meant coming back to the last place Chief Tanner had ever stood on American soil, and I had spent 15 years being very, very good at not coming back. There is a particular loneliness to the night before you take command, and no one warns you about it because there is no one to warn you. Your peers are not there. Your family is not there, or if they are, they cannot come with you into the specific room where this happens. The people you are about to lead do not know you yet, and could not help, even if they did, because the whole point is that tomorrow you become the person they lean on, which means tonight you are the person with no one to lean on. You are, for one night, entirely alone with the size of the thing, and there is nothing to do but sit with it and let it be as big as it is, and trust that in the morning your hands will know what to do, even if your heart is still catching up. I had felt it before, at the smaller commands. It does not get smaller. If anything, it grows, because each time you understand a little better what you are actually signing for. There was a window in my room that looked out over the grinder. I stood at it for a while in the dark with the lights off, watching the empty deck under the floods, the painted lines and the flagpole and the little reviewing stand they had set up for the morning. I had stood on that deck at 24 and thought I was made of something that could not break. I know what I am made of now. I found out on a night in 2011, and I have been carrying the answer ever since. People think command is the shoulder boards. It is not the shoulder boards. The boards are the least of it, a little gold shorthand for a thing that does not fit on a shoulder. Command is the moment at 3 a.m. when a phone rings and a voice you have come to love tells you that one of your people is hurt or gone or in trouble that you cannot fix, and you have to make a decision anyway. Cleanly, with your voice steady, because 300 other people are listening to how steady your voice is and calibrating their own fear against it. Command is being the person who does not get to fall apart on schedule. Command is signing the thing and owning the thing and standing in front of the formation the next morning as if you had slept. I had done it before, at smaller commands, on staffs, in the long apprenticeship the Navy makes you serve before it lets you have a team of your own. I knew what I was walking into. Knowing does not make it lighter, it just means you have stopped being surprised by the weight. And this team was heavier than most for me for one specific reason, and I made myself look straight at the reason in the dark, because a thing you refuse to look at will run your life from the shadows, and I had let this one run mine from the shadows for 15 years. I squared the shoulder boards on the chair so they would be waiting for 0600, and I lay down in the dark, and I let the old thread pull me back the way it always does when I am too tired to hold it off. Chief Wesley Tanner was the first person on this team who ever treated me like I was worth the trouble of teaching. I reported aboard as a lieutenant, junior grade, in the fall of 2008. I was 24. I had done everything right to get there. Every school, every board, every gate, and I arrived with the particular thin-skinned pride of a young officer who has been told she is exceptional and has not yet been tested in any way that counts. I knew a great deal. I understood almost nothing. There is a difference, and the community exists, in part, to teach it to you. Tanner was a chief petty officer then, mid-30s, already an old man by the standards of the work. He had a face like weather and a flat, unhurried way of speaking that made you lean in. He had forgotten more about the job than I had learned, and he never once used that fact as a weapon, which is rarer than it should be. He took one look at me on my first week, a lieutenant so junior I still squeaked, and instead of doing what a lot of senior enlisted men do with a young officer, which is to smile politely and rout around you until you are gone, he decided to make me useful. "You sign it, ma'am, you own it," he told me the first time he walked me through a plan. He said it without heat, the way you state a law of physics. Doesn't matter who wrote it. Doesn't matter who briefed it. Your name goes on the bottom, that's the whole job. Everything that happens after, good and bad, that's yours now. You want to be an officer in this outfit. That's the price. You okay with that price? I told him I was. I was 24. I did not have the faintest idea what I was agreeing to. He taught me the compound. He taught me which senior chiefs to listen to and which ones to merely obey. He taught me how to walk into a space full of men who had all decided in advance that I did not belong there, and how to make them change their minds without ever once asking them to. Do the work. Know the details better than anyone. Never perform, never flinch. Let the loud people be loud and be the quiet one that the room slowly, grudgingly learns to trust. Most of what I know about not needing a room's approval, I learned from a man who never needed mine. I will give you one memory of him, so that he is a person to you, and not just a name I keep saying. It was my first deployment, early, when I was still getting most things wrong. I had made a call on a resupply that was technically correct and completely tone-deaf. The kind of by-the-book decision that a young officer makes to prove she can read the book, and it had cost a team a hard night they did not need to have. No one had been hurt. It had just been unnecessary, and everyone knew it, and I could feel the temperature of the space drop a few degrees every time I walked into it. Tanner did not lecture me. He never lectured. He found me the next day cleaning weapons I had already cleaned, which is what you do when you are 25 and you need your hands busy, so your face has something to do besides fall apart. And he sat down across from me and picked up a rag and started working alongside me, not saying anything, for a good 10 minutes. Then he said, "You know what you did wrong." "Yes, Chief." "Then I don't need to tell you." He kept working the rag. "Here's the part they don't teach you at the schoolhouse, ma'am. You're going to make bad calls. Everybody in this room has made bad calls. The job isn't making perfect calls because there's no such animal. The job is being the kind of officer your people will follow into the next one anyway, after they've watched you make a bad one, and own it and not go to pieces about it. You went and hid in the armory to clean guns that were already clean. That's fine. Everybody needs a place to put it. But you be back on that floor in an hour with your chin up, because they don't need you sorry, they need you steady. Sorry is about you, steady is about them. Learn the difference, and you'll be worth something to this team. I have thought about that conversation 10,000 times. Sorry is about you, steady is about them. It is the single most useful thing anyone has ever said to me, and it has walked into the room with me at every hard moment of my career, including the one that was coming at 0600, and he said it to me over a rag and a rifle when I was 25, and certain the whole world could see how badly I had failed. We deployed together twice. The second time, in the winter of 2011, we were running a series of night movements out of a forward compound that smelled like dust and generator exhaust, and the specific cold of a high desert that does not care whether you live. I was 27 by then, a full lieutenant, good at my job, confident in the earned way now, not the given way, which is more dangerous because it feels like wisdom. I planned a movement, I briefed it, I signed it. My name went on the bottom, the way Tanner had taught me, and I felt the small, clean pride of a professional signing for professional work. It went wrong in the way these things go wrong, which is not cinematic. There was no single mistake with my name on it, no moment where a different choice would obviously have changed everything. There was weather, and there was bad information that we had every reason to trust, and there was the ordinary friction of a hard night in a hard place. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, the situation turned, and men who had left the compound whole were suddenly fighting to get everyone back to it. Tanner was the reason they made it. All of them. He put himself in the place where the trouble was, the way he always had, and he moved people out of it, one after another, with the flat competence of a man doing a job he had done 1,000 times. And when the count was finally right, when everyone who had gone out was accounted for and moving home, the count was right by one, less than it should have been, because the last man out had not made it, and the last man out was him. I signed that report too. My name on the bottom. I have signed a great many documents in the 15 years since. Evaluations, awards, letters, orders, plans of every kind. I have signed things that sent people to schools, and things that ended careers, and things that mattered enormously to the person receiving them, and nothing at all to me. None of them, not one, has ever weighed what that report weighed. You sign it, you own it. He taught me that, and then he made me prove I had learned it in the worst possible way, by dying under a plan with my name on the bottom. There is a memorial wall on this compound with his name on it. In 15 years, I had arranged, very carefully, without ever admitting to myself that I was arranging it, never to stand in front of that wall. I had taken assignments that kept me away. I had made my peace, or told myself I had, from a safe distance, the way you make peace with a country you have decided never to visit again. I did not sleep, that first deployment, for a long time after we lost him. I would lie in the dark and run the plan again, looking for the line I could have written differently, the branch I could have seen, the piece of information I should have distrusted. There was no such line. I know that now, and I knew it then in the part of my mind that does the honest accounting. The plan had been sound, the night had simply been one of the nights that the world wins, and there are such nights, and no amount of competence buys you out of them entirely. But knowing a thing in the accounting part of your mind and believing it in the part of your mind that keeps you up at night are two different countries, and I have spent 15 years traveling between them. What saved me, in the end, was the same thing Tanner had given me over the rifle and the rag. Sorry is about you. Steady is about them. There were young men on that team who had watched their chief die, and they did not need their officer coming apart in front of them. They needed me steady. So I was steady, on the outside, where it counted for them, and I did the coming apart later, privately on my own time, over a great many years, in a great many quiet rooms, never once in front of the people it would have cost. That is the bargain the job asks of you, and I made it, and I would make it again. But it has a price. And the price is that the grief never gets a clean public burial. It just goes underground and lives there. And it comes up when you least expect it, in a dark room the night before you take command of the team that put it there. And now the Navy, in its flat institutional wisdom, had decided that the right officer to command this team was the one who had left a piece of herself on it. Orders are orders. I had said yes. And that was the real reason I lay awake in the dark, the night two strangers told me I was in the wrong gym. 0600 hours comes whether you have slept or not. I was up long before it. I shaved the edges of the morning down to a routine, because routine is what you hold on to when the day itself is too large to hold. I showered. I put on the service dress. I squared the shoulder boards one last time, and this time they were on my shoulders, where 20 years had put them. and they weighed exactly what they were supposed to weigh. The compound at dawn was a different animal than the compound at night. Under the early light, it filled up with purpose. There's a specific choreography to a change of command, older than anyone performing it, and the machinery of it began to turn around me the way it has turned for every officer who has ever stood where I was about to stand. There were side boys in their dress uniforms, white gloves positioned to render the honors that the Navy has rendered, since it had ships and shores to render them on. There was a chaplain, there was a small band, there was the outgoing commanding officer, a man named Grant Whitfield, 45 years old, who had held this team for 2 years and was handing it over clean, the way a professional does, with the slightly hollowed-out look of a man who is proud and tired in equal measure. And there was the presiding officer, the group commander, a Navy captain named Renata Alsop, 49, silver at her temples, with the flat, assessing eyes of someone who has watched a great many officers try to be equal to a great many moments. And there was the team. They formed up on the grinder in their ranks, 300 and some men and women of the command and its supporting elements, and I stood off to the side where the incoming officer waits, and I looked at them, and somewhere in the front rank I found the 2 faces I was looking for. Ryan Meacham, Thomas Egland. I would learn the names within the hour, but I knew the faces the second I found them. The larger one and the leaner one, the one who had told me I was in the wrong gym, and the one who had told me to go find the treadmill. They were locked at attention in the front rank, eyes front, the way you are at the beginning of a ceremony when you do not yet know that the ceremony is going to have anything to do with you. I watched the exact moment it began to. It is a specific thing to watch, and I would be lying if I told you there was no part of me that watched it closely. The incoming commanding officer walks a certain path at a change of command, and that path took me across the front of the formation, and as I walked it in service dress, with the commander's boards on my shoulders and the whole apparatus of the morning arranging itself around me, I watched Ryan Meacham's eyes come off the middle distance and find my face. I watched him not understand for a half second. I watched him understand. I watched the previous night rearrange itself behind his eyes, the gym, the bar, the word sweetheart, the word babysit, the treadmill, all of it sliding into a new and much worse configuration as he realized who the woman in the corner had been. His face did the thing a face does when a person's stomach drops out from under them while they are required to stand perfectly still. Beside him, a half second later, Egland got there too. Neither of them said anything. There is nothing to say, at attention, in the front rank, while the officer you insulted the night before walks up to take command of your team. There is only the standing there, in the understanding, and the very long few minutes before you find out exactly how much your life is about to change. I will tell you what I felt, walking past them, because it is the whole point of this story. I felt the pull of the small, satisfying thing. I want to be honest about that. Anyone who tells you they would feel no temptation in that moment is telling you a story about a better person than exists. I had a lectern coming. I had a microphone coming. I had 300 people and a captain and a band and every structural advantage a human being can have. And I had 2 men in the front rank who had earned, by any fair accounting, a bad morning. I could have named the gym. I could have made a remark, just sharp enough, just deniable enough, that the whole formation would have understood, and those 2 men would have carried for the rest of their careers. I could have let them twist for the length of a ceremony, and then let them off, and everyone would have said the new commander had a spine and a sense of humor, and I would have been right, and it would have felt good. And there was the other thing too, the heavier one, pressing up from underneath. Because it was not only 2 men and a gym, it was this team, this exact team, this deck, this ground that had taken Wesley Tanner and never given him back, and here I was, being asked to pick it up and carry it and love it. And there was a part of me that wanted, obscurely, to make someone pay for that. And 2 convenient targets had presented themselves the night before, like a gift. Command Master Chief Hardaway found me first, in the few minutes before the formation stepped off, and I understood the moment I saw his face that he had worked all of it out overnight, exactly as I had known he would. He came up beside me, squared away in his dress uniform, and he did not say a single word about the gym or the night before or the walk across the dark compound. What he said was quieter and more dangerous than any of that. "Ma'am," he said low, looking straight ahead at the formation. "I know my people. I know which 2 you're going to be looking at in that front rank, and I know why. You don't have to spend your morning on it. Say the word and I will handle it myself, after, quietly, in a way you'll never have to think about again. It would be my privilege. I understood exactly what he was offering me. He was offering to be the instrument of the thing I wanted, so that my own hands would stay clean. He was offering me the mercy of not having to choose, the pleasure of the correction with none of the cost. It is the most seductive offer a subordinate can make to a leader. And the fact that he made it out of loyalty rather than malice made it more seductive, not less. Every part of me that was still standing in that gym the night before wanted to say yes. Master Chief, thank you. Handle it. No, I said. But I appreciate you more than I can tell you right now. Leave those two to me. And Master Chief, whatever you think you're going to do to them on my behalf, don't. That's an order, and it's the first one I'm giving you, and I need you to hear why. If I let you square my accounts for me, then I'm exactly the officer they thought I was in that gym. A person who needs a bigger man to do her fighting. I didn't spend 20 years becoming someone else so I could hand it off the first hard morning. Are we good? He was quiet for a second, then something in his face settled, the specific settling of a senior man deciding that the officer he is stuck with might turn out to be worth following, and he said, "We're good, ma'am." And I heard, underneath it, that I had just passed a test I had not known he was giving me, which is the only kind of test that senior chiefs ever give. Captain Alsop found me a moment after that. She has the gift that very senior people sometimes have of seeing more than you have shown them. She looked at me for a moment, taking in whatever was on my face that I thought I had hidden. "You look like a woman carrying two things at once, Commander," she said quietly. "I am, ma'am," I said. There was no point lying to her. "I don't intend to set either of them down in front of 300 people. She looked at me a moment longer, and then something in her eyes approved, and she said, "Good. Then let's go give you a team." That was the moment I decided, if I am honest, though the decision had been forming since the door of that gym closed behind me the night before. I was not going to spend the morning on the smallest available target. I was not going to use 20 years and 3 stripes and the whole weight of the United States Navy to win a fight against 2 enlisted men who had made a stupid, human mistake in a gym and were already, visibly, paying for it in the only currency that mattered, which was the slow horror of understanding. I could relieve a man of his dignity in one sentence, in front of everyone whose respect he had spent his whole adult life earning. It is one of the easiest things in the world to do from a position of power. I had done much harder things than decline to do it. Declining to do it was, I had come to believe, most of what the power was actually for. So I made a different decision about what the morning would be about. It would be about the team. It would be about the standard I was going to hold them to, which I could hold 2 men to just as easily by holding all of them to it, without ever pointing at anyone. And it would be about Wesley Tanner, because I had decided, standing there with Alsop's approval still warm on me, that I was finally going to say his name out loud, on this deck, in front of this team, and pay in the open the debt I had spent 15 years paying in private. The ceremony began. If you have never seen a change of command, it is a strange and moving thing, precisely because it is so unconcerned with the people performing it. It is older than all of us. It says, in effect, that the team is the thing that matters, and that the individuals who hold it are temporary, and that authority is not a personal possession, but a trust passed from hand to hand under the eyes of everyone it belongs to. The chaplain spoke. The band played. Captain Alsop spoke, briefly and well, about Whitfield's 2 years and what the team had done under him. Then it was Whitfield's turn, and he said the things an outgoing commander says, the thanks and the pride and the particular ache of letting go of something you have loved and bled for, and he said them like a man who meant them. And then came the part that is the actual mechanism, the part that transfers a team from one human being to another using nothing but words and witnesses. The adjutant read the orders. My orders. The flat, formal language of the Navy, directing Commander Adrian Sturgis to proceed to this command and assume command of this team. My name, read aloud, off an official document, across a formation of the people it now bound me to. You sign it, you own it. I had signed these. Now I owned this. Whitfield turned to me. We faced each other in the center of the deck, in front of everyone. I am ready to be relieved, he said. I relieve you, sir, I said. 4 words. I have thought a great deal over the years about how much weight the Navy hangs on 4 words. Whitfield and I saluted. He stepped back and I stepped forward, and in the space of that single exchange, the team stopped being his and became mine, in front of 300 witnesses and a captain and God and Chief Tanner's name on a wall 100 yards away. Captain Alsop confirmed it, formally, for the record and for the crowd. And then it was my turn to speak, and I stepped to the lectern and looked out at the team that was now mine, and I found in the front rank the 2 men who did not yet know what kind of morning they were going to have. I kept it short. Good remarks are always short. I said it was the honor of my life to stand on this deck again, and I let the word again sit there for a second, because a few of the older hands in the formation were old enough to know what it meant. And I saw 1 or 2 of them register it. Then I said what I had come to say. Almost 20 years ago, I said, I reported aboard this team as a lieutenant, junior grade, and I was insufferable. I knew everything, and I understood nothing, and the first person on this compound who decided I was worth the trouble of fixing was a chief petty officer named Wesley Tanner. I said his name clearly. I made myself do it. The first time in 15 years I had said it out loud on this ground, and it did not break me, though it came closer than I let my face show. Chief Tanner taught me the only thing about this job that has ever really mattered, I said. He told me, you sign it, you own it. Everything that happens after your name goes on the bottom is yours, good and bad, no exceptions, no excuses. He taught me that, and then he proved it, on a night in 2011, by getting every man out of a bad situation except himself. His name is on the wall behind you. I am going to expect you to be worthy of it. The formation was very quiet, the specific quiet of people who have stopped performing attention and started actually paying it. I let that sit. I could feel the older hands in the formation carrying it, the ones who had known him, and I could feel the younger ones understanding that the name on the wall behind them had just become a person, which is the only thing a name on a wall ever wants to become. I am going to expect a few other things, I said. I am going to expect you to be the hardest people in the world to impress, and the very hardest to embarrass. I do not care who you think is watching. I do not care whether you think someone belongs in your gym, at your rack, in your spaces, on your team. You will hold every single person to the same standard, the high one, the one Chief Tanner held me to, and you will hold it whether or not you think anyone important is looking. Because the whole point, the entire point of everything we do here, is that we are the same when no one is watching as we are when everyone is. That is the job. Anything less is theater, and we do not do theater. I was not looking at Meacham and Egland when I said it. I made a point of not looking at them. I let it land on the whole formation, the way the truth is supposed to, and I let those 2 men understand, without a single eye turned in their direction, that every word of it was also, precisely, for them, and that I knew exactly what they had done, and that I was not going to use it to destroy them. I was going to use it to build them, whether they liked it or not. I finished. The team came to attention and rendered the salute to their new commanding officer, 300 hands snapping up at once. And I returned it. And I will tell you, because I was watching for it, that 2 men in the front rank rendered that salute harder and straighter and more completely than anyone else on the deck. Like men trying to put 15 years of correction into a single motion. Like men who had just been handed back a dignity they had been sure they were about to lose, and who understood, in that moment, exactly what it had cost me to hand it back instead of taking theirs. The ceremony ended the way these things end, with the crowd loosening and the band playing and the slow dispersal of a formation into a few hundred individual human beings with somewhere to be. I stood at the edge of the deck, receiving the handshakes and the congratulations, the long line of them, and I watched out of the corner of my eye 2 men making their way toward me through the crowd who had not been sent for. They came up formal, covers off, both of them, standing at something close to attention, even in the loosening crowd. The larger one, Meacham, spoke first, and to his credit, he did not flinch from it. "Ma'am," he said. His face was gray. "Last night in the gym, there's no excuse for it. I'm not going to give you one." "There isn't," I said. "And I'm glad you're not." I did not offer them a way out. That would have been its own kind of contempt, the pat on the head that says you did not really matter enough for it to count. What they had done had counted. I let it count. Eglin tried once. "Ma'am, we didn't know who you—" "I know you didn't know who I was," I said, and I said it flat, without heat, which is the only way to say the thing that actually needs saying. "That's the entire problem. You were exactly as decent as you thought you had to be for the person you thought I was. That's not a standard. That's a performance for an audience. I just spent a morning telling 300 people that we do not do performances on this team. So here's what I need from the two of you." They waited. "You will treat every single person who walks into that gym, into these spaces, onto this compound, exactly the way you would have treated me if you'd known what was on my shoulders," I said. "Every contractor, every spouse, every brand new sailor who wanders in looking lost, every person you have already decided doesn't belong. You will call them the things you called me, or you will call none of them those things, and I would strongly recommend none. Decide which kind of team this is going to be. You two, specifically, are going to decide it, because you are going to remember this morning every single time you are tempted to be small for the rest of your careers. Do you understand me?" "Yes, ma'am," they said together. "Good," I said. "Then we're done with it. I mean that. We are done with it. I am not going to carry this around, and I am not going to let you carry it around either, because I need you working, not groveling. Go be the operators I just told everyone you are." And I put out my hand, and I shook each of theirs, and I watched something come back into their faces that an apology alone could never have bought them, which was the thing a person feels when they have been held fully accountable and fully kept at the same time. They left with more of my respect than they had walked up with, which is not what either of us would have predicted the night before, and which is, I have come to believe, most of what leadership actually is. Word travels fast in a small command. It travels faster than any official channel through the back hallways and the smoke pit and the quiet asides in the wardroom. And by the time I had finished the handshake line and made my way inside, the whole team already knew some version of it. The new CO had been in the gym last night. Meekim and Eglin had run their mouths, and instead of ending them at the lectern, she had said a dead chief's name and told everyone to hold the line whether or not anyone was watching. And then she had shaken their hands. I could feel the command recalibrating around me as I walked through it that first day. That is the thing they do not fully prepare you for about command. How much of it happens in the first few hours, in the small decisions that everyone watches and no one mentions, in the tone you set before you have signed a single official thing. They were watching how I handled the easiest possible layup, two men who had insulted me and handed me every excuse to be cruel. And they had watched me decline it, and they were adjusting their sense of what kind of officer had just taken over their lives. Hardaway came to my office late that first afternoon, after the day had spent itself down to paperwork. He knocked, which he did not have to do, and he stood in the doorway for a second before he came in, and I could see he had something to say that he had been turning over. "Permission to speak freely, Skipper," he said. "Always," I said, "especially in here. If you and I can't say the true thing to each other in this room, this whole team is in trouble." He came in and did not sit, because he was old school that way. "I've served 11 commanding officers," he said. "I've watched all 11 of them take command, and I've watched most of them in the first day or two find some small person to make an example of, just to show the team they've got teeth. It's the most natural thing in the world. Nobody would have blinked if you'd done it to those two this morning. They earned it. Half the wardroom expected it. I half expected it, and I'm the one who offered to do it for you. And you said a dead chief's name instead, and you told 300 people to hold the line whether or not anybody's watching, and then you shook the hands of the two men who'd have been the example." He was quiet for a moment. "I knew West Tanner, ma'am. I was a first class when you were a JG. I was on the compound the night we lost him. I didn't know until this morning that the plan had your name on it, and I've been thinking all day about what it must have taken for you to stand on that deck and say his name out loud in front of the wall." He stopped. "I just wanted you to know that I saw it. That's all. The team saw a change of command. I saw what it cost you, and I'm going to follow you, Skipper. And so are they, and I don't think a single one of them could tell you exactly why. And I could, but I won't, because some things a commanding officer should get to keep." I did not trust my voice completely, so I kept the answer short, which Tanner would have approved of. "Thank you, Master Chief." He nodded once and left, and I sat in the quiet of my new office for a while. And I understood that I had just been handed the thing that no ceremony can confer, and no set of orders can direct, the thing you can only be given and never take, which is the freely offered loyalty of the one man on the compound, whose loyalty the rest of them would follow. I had not earned it by being right about 2 operators in a gym. I had earned it by declining to cash in on being right and by paying a debt in the open that I could have kept paying in the dark. Those are different currencies, and the team, it turned out, only respected the second one. I did not do it for that. I want to be clear about that because it would be easy to tell this story as if the mercy were a maneuver, a clever way to win the team. It was not. If it had been a maneuver, it would have been a worse thing and probably a less effective one because people can smell a performance, and I had just finished telling 300 of them that we do not do performances. I declined to destroy those 2 men because destroying them was beneath the office I had just accepted, and because Wesley Tanner had taught me that the standard you hold when no one is making you is the only standard that is really yours. That the team recalibrated around it was a consequence, not a plan. The best consequences usually are. Captain Alsop caught me one more time before she left the compound at the edge of the parking area where her car was waiting. She had watched the whole thing, the remarks, the salute, the 2 men coming up to me afterward, all of it, with those flat, assessing eyes that had watched a great many officers try to be equal to a great many moments. "You said his name," she said. It was not a question. "Chief Tanner, I read your record on the flight in. I know whose plan it was." "Yes, ma'am. You could have commanded this team for 2 years and never said it once. Nobody would have faulted you. Most people would have called it good judgment." She looked at me. "Why did you?" I thought about how to answer that honestly, because she had earned an honest answer. "Because I've spent 15 years being steady in front of my people and doing the coming apart in private," I said. "And I decided this morning that I've been calling that discipline when at least half of it was just cowardice wearing discipline's uniform. I can't ask 300 people to hold a line I'm not willing to walk up to myself. The line for me was that wall, so I walked up to it." Alsop was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's the most useful thing I've heard a new commanding officer say in about a decade." And she got in her car and she left me the team, and I have thought about what she said nearly as often as I have thought about what Tanner said, which is the highest compliment I know how to pay a sentence. But the team was the easy part. The team, I understood. The team I had been training my whole adult life to pick up and carry. What I had not trained for, what no school prepares you for, was the wall. I went to it at midday, alone. I had told myself for 15 years that I would go when I was ready, and I had understood, somewhere underneath the telling, that ready was a country I was never going to arrive in, that I was using it the way people use later, as a place to put a thing you cannot face. And then the Navy had gone and made me the commanding officer of the team whose wall it was, and readiness had stopped being the point. The job required it. Command is like that. It reaches into the private rooms you have kept locked, and it opens them, not cruelly, just as a matter of course. Because you cannot lead people past a place, you are still refusing to go yourself. The memorial was on the far side of the compound, a low wall of dark stone in a small square of grass, kept green and cut short. The names were cut into it, more of them than there should ever be, going back decades. I found his without looking, the way you find a face in a crowd you have been searching for your whole life. Wesley Tanner, Chief Petty Officer, the dates, 15 years of not standing here. And here I was, and the stone was just stone, and his name was just letters, and it undid me anyway, quietly, the way the real things do. "I command the team now, Chief," I said out loud, to a wall, feeling foolish and not caring. "I don't know what you make of that. I know what you'd say about the gym last night. You'd have told me I did the right thing, and then you'd have told me not to be proud of myself for it, because doing the right thing is the floor, not the ceiling. You always did have a way of giving me a compliment and taking it back in the same breath, so I'd keep working." I told him about the 2 men in the gym, out loud, because there was no one to hear it and because I found I wanted to. "You'd have liked how it played out, Chief," I said. "A couple of your operators decided I was a lost spouse looking for the treadmill, and I finished my set and walked out. Just like you taught me, and then this morning I took their team. And I didn't burn them for it. I could have. Every part of me wanted to. I heard your voice instead. Sorry is about you, steady is about them. I gave them the standard and I kept them. You'd have told me that was the floor and not the ceiling. You'd have been right." I almost smiled, standing in front of a wall. "You were usually right. It was the least charming thing about you." I stood there for a while. I did not try to make it into anything. I have sat through enough ceremonies to know that the real moments are almost never ceremonial. that grief does not care about your schedule or your rank, that it comes when it comes and asks only that you finally stop running from it. I had commanded that team for 6 hours, and it had already made me do the one thing I had spent 15 years arranging my life to avoid. That is command. It does not ask whether you are ready. It hands you the thing, and it says, "This is yours now." All of it, the deck and the team and the wall and the name, you sign it, you own it. And it was right, and he would have been the first to say so. I put my hand flat against the stone. It was cold, even at midday, the way stone is. There was no one watching. For once in a life spent standing in front of formations and boards and rooms full of people who had already decided who I was. There was no audience at all, and I let myself feel the whole weight of it, the debt I would never discharge and did not want to, because the debt was the last thing I had of him, and I was not going to pay it off and be free of it. Some things you are not supposed to get over. You are supposed to get better at carrying them. That is different, and it is enough. I stayed longer than I meant to. There was no one to perform for, and nowhere I had to be that could not wait 10 more minutes for its commanding officer. And I had spent 15 years not giving myself these 10 minutes, so I gave them to myself now. I read the other names too, the ones on either side of his, men and women I had never met who had paid the same price for the same work, and I thought about the strange arithmetic of a place like this, that the wall gets longer and the mission goes on and the compound fills up every morning with people who have decided that the thing is worth the wall, and that my whole job, the entire weight of the boards on my shoulders, came down to this: to spend the lives on that wall as carefully as if each one were the only one, and to make sure that the people not yet on it stayed off it as long as I could possibly keep them off it, and to be honest with myself and with them about the fact that I would not be able to keep all of them off it, because no one ever has. That is the job. It is a terrible job. I wanted it more than I have ever wanted anything. Then I took my hand off the stone and I squared myself away and I went back to work because there was a team to run and he would have wanted me running it. That was months ago now. Ryan Meacham and Thomas Eglund turned out, in the end, to be exactly the kind of men who are worth the trouble of correcting. Which is not a coincidence, because the men worth correcting are almost always the ones who feel the correction most, and those two had felt it all the way down. They became, over the following weeks, among the steadiest people I had. Not because they were afraid of me. Fear makes bad operators and worse men. They became steady because I had shown them, on the worst possible morning of their careers, that the standard was real and that it was survivable, that a person could fail against it and be held to it and kept anyway. And that is a thing men will follow a very long way. I never brought up the gym again. Not once. I meant what I told them, that we were done with it, and I have found over the years that the fastest way to make a lesson permanent is to refuse to keep poking it. They carried it on their own, better than I ever could have made them. I would see it sometimes in how they were with a new sailor, with a nervous spouse at a family event, with a contractor fumbling for a badge at a door. They had become careful with people in the specific way of men who have learned hard what carelessness costs. I never said a word about it. I did not have to. That was the whole point. There was one afternoon, a couple of months in, that told me everything I needed to know about whether the lesson had taken. A young sailor had wandered into the team gym, a brand new kid, so junior he was practically translucent, clearly lost, clearly certain he was in a place he was not allowed to be, standing frozen just inside the door, the way you stand when you are 19 and sure you are about to get yelled at. I happened to be passing the hatch and I stopped, out of sight, because I am not above watching my own experiment run. Meekum saw the kid before Eglin did. And I watched the man who had told me to go find the treadmill walk over to a terrified 19-year-old. And I watched him not do the easy thing, the funny thing, the thing that would have gotten a laugh from the room. I watched him put a hand on the kid's shoulder and say, "You looking for the main gym? Easy mistake, they built them too close together. Come on, I'll walk you. What's your name?" And he walked the kid out, talking to him the whole way, and the kid left standing a little taller than he came in, and Meacham came back and picked his bar up again like nothing had happened, because to him now, nothing had. It was just how you treated a person who wandered into your space, looking lost. He had no idea I had seen it. I never told him. But I want you to understand that this is what the morning had bought. This small and completely invisible kindness to a kid who would never know how close he had come to being someone's easy laugh, and that this, not the ceremony, not the salute, not the 4 words on the deck, was the actual point of all of it. I stood on the grinder at dusk one evening a few weeks in, after the team had knocked off, when the light was going long and gold across the concrete and the flag was coming down. I stood in the spot I had stood in at 24 years old, the certain girl who was sure she would never be afraid, and I was a long way from her now. I have been afraid many times since. I have signed things that cost more than I wanted to pay. I have stood in front of a wall I spent 15 years avoiding and put my hand on a cold stone and said a name I had not let myself say. And I would not trade the woman I am now for the certainty of the girl I was, not for anything, because her certainty was made of things that had never been tested, and mine is made of things that have. The deck that had cost me so much was mine to keep now. The team was mine. The name was on the wall, and I could stand in front of it now, which I could not have done a year ago. The compound lights came up as the sky went dark, one bank at a time the way they do, and I stood there in the middle of all of it, steadier than I had ever been, and clearer about why. I want to say one thing to you, whoever you are, because I think it might be the only part of this that travels. Somewhere, at some point, someone is going to decide who you are before you have said a single word. They are going to look at you, at your clothes or your face or your size or your sex or whatever it is they use to sort people into the ones who matter and the ones who do not. And they are going to tell you, in one way or another, that you are in the wrong room. It has happened to me more times than I can count, in a plain gray shirt in a gym and in a lot of other places besides. It will happen again. It will happen to you. When it does, understand this. You do not owe that person a performance. You do not owe them your anger or your proof or the satisfaction of watching you scramble to show them how wrong they are. Let them be wrong. Their wrongness is not your emergency. Finish your set. Rack your bar. Walk out clean. And then, when the morning comes and the truth arrives on its own, as it almost always does, remember that you will have more power in that moment than the person who dismissed you ever had, and that the measure of you will not be whether you were right. You were always going to be right. The measure of you will be what you do with being right, whether you spend all that power on the smallest possible target, or whether you use it the way it was meant to be used, which is to hold the line and hold it high, and hold it whether or not anyone is watching. That is the standard. It was given to me by a man who is a name on a wall now, and I have spent my life trying to be worthy of it, and I am still trying, which is, I have come to understand, the whole of the job. Finish your set, walk out clean. And when your morning comes, and it will come, be larger than the moment that made you, and larger than the small satisfaction of proving you were the one who was right all along. I have never once regretted the mornings I chose to be large. I have regretted, more than I can tell you, the handful of times I chose to be small. That is the only wisdom I have to give you, bought at full price over 20 years, and one long night in front of a wall, and I am giving it to you for free. Take it. It will cost you nothing but the pleasure of a cruelty you are never going to remember fondly anyway. You will never regret it, I promise you that.